Barron Trump stood up and declared, "You don't represent American values." Jasmine didn't flinch. She simply held up one document. And suddenly, nobody could meet her eyes. The room froze. It was supposed to be a standard congressional subcommittee hearing on immigration and cultural integration. Nothing viral, nothing explosive, until it became a televised reckoning between America's loudest legacy and one of its fiercest reformers. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, composed and sharp-eyed as ever, adjusted the microphone in front of her. She didn't blink, she didn't speak. Her fingers gently tapped a thin manila folder stamped IMMTRP 1935. Across from her sat Barron Trump, now 20 years old, a rising conservative commentator already being floated as a future Senate candidate. He wore a Navy suit and carried the posture of someone who'd never heard no in a meaningful way. "You claim to speak for the people," he said confidently, voice crisp and projected. "But your voting record shows you don't believe in the Constitution. You're anti-police, anti-family, anti-America. You weren't raised with American values, Congresswoman." Gasps scattered through the hearing room. Even C-SPAN's camera shook slightly as the operator adjusted for tension. Reporters' pens hovered mid-air. Jasmine's lips curled slightly, half smile, half something else. Her voice, when it came, was velvet wrapped around steel. "Mr. Trump," she said, "since you brought up family and American values, I believe this document is now relevant to the record." She slid the manila folder forward with quiet precision. No theatrics, no rage, just inevitability. Inside, certified immigration records dated March 14th, 1935, signed by Friedrich Drumpf, the original name of Donald Trump's grandfather. The document detailed his entry into the U.S. under questionable circumstances, including a 1918 attempt to re-enter the country after being deported from Bavaria. "Your great-grandfather," she continued, her voice rising just enough to command the silence, "lied on his naturalization form, denied his original name, denied his purpose for staying, swore allegiance only after being threatened with deportation a second time. That's not speculation. That's in here." Barron's confident expression didn't break, but it hardened. His jaw clenched. His fingers twitched against the table. Jasmine leaned forward. "So, before we talk about what makes someone American, let's talk about how your family got here in the first place. Because some of us had to fight to belong. Some of us didn't have the luxury of rewriting our names and pasts to fit in." The room was silent. Even the chairman, a veteran Republican from Texas, sat frozen. Journalists began furiously typing, and in that moment, with one thin folder and 3 sentences, Jasmine Crockett had flipped the power dynamic. Barron Trump had entered the room to put her on trial. Now, he was the one under the microscope. And she hadn't even started yet. The silence didn't last long. A single camera shutter snapped, and just like that, the entire hearing room became a battleground. Phones were raised. Tweets were being drafted mid-air. Producers in newsrooms whispered urgently into earpieces. But Jasmine Crockett didn't rush. She didn't need to. She knew the effect of silence. She'd practiced restraint in courtrooms for over a decade before stepping into Congress. And she could sense it. Barron Trump's armor cracking, not from the document alone, but from the way the room now saw him. "Would you like me to read the rest, Mr. Trump?" she asked, holding up the document like a lit match in a dry forest. "No," he said firmly. His voice was lower now, controlled but not calm. Jasmine continued anyway. March 1935. Immigration Office, Ellis Island. Application number 084113. Mr. Friedrich Drumpf claimed he was born in Sweden. That's a lie. He was born in Karlstadt, Germany, and he wasn't a war refugee. He was a draft dodger. Whispers swept the chamber like wind. The chairman coughed. A staffer dropped their pen. Barron's face flushed, but he forced a smile. So we're digging up 90-year-old documents now? That's your defense? A smear campaign against my family history? Jasmine closed the folder slowly. You called me un-American. You questioned my belonging. So I thought we'd take a look at who belongs and how they got here. The line landed hard. This wasn't just about a historical document anymore. This was about power, who had it, how they got it, and who they tried to exclude once they had it. Jasmine turned to the committee chairman. With permission, I'd like to enter this file into the congressional record as Exhibit 27. The chairman nodded mutely. No objections, no motions, just history, suddenly weaponized. Barron leaned forward. Your party thrives on division, Congresswoman. You don't care about the facts. You care about winning arguments on social media. Really? Jasmine arched a brow. Then why are the facts making you sweat? The room snickered. Even a few Republican aides struggled to hide their smirks. She shifted her tone, not mocking, but deliberate. Barron, you want to talk about American values? Let's talk about honesty, about owning your past, about telling the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. He opened his mouth to speak, but Jasmine raised a hand. I grew up in St. Louis. My mother worked nights cleaning hospital rooms. My father sold used tires. We didn't rewrite our names. We didn't claim we were from somewhere else to make the paperwork easier. We earned everything under our own name, with our own sweat. Another pause. This time, the silence wasn't awkward. It was respect. I'm proud of where I come from. I'm proud of being black, being a woman, being working class. And yes, I'm proud of being American. Not because it was handed to me, but because I built it for myself. Jasmine's voice lowered. You said I don't represent American values. But let me ask you something, Mr. Trump. What does it say about your values when the only thing you inherited more than wealth was denial? Boom! C-SPAN's live stream viewers jumped by 40,000 in 5 minutes. Social media exploded. Hashtag Trump files trended within minutes. And Barron? He sat still, eyes locked on the folder he once thought was irrelevant. This wasn't just a debate anymore. It was a demolition. Barron Trump sat forward in his chair, eyes narrow, lips pressed into a firm line. The manila folder now rested on the table like a loaded weapon, one that hadn't yet finished firing. You talk about pride, he began slowly, voice recovering its sharpness. But what about accountability? What about the crime rates in your district? What about the thousands of young men being lost to drugs and gang violence under your watch? The shift was calculated. Blame her district. Question her leadership. Make it about policy failure, not personal lineage. Cameras snapped again. Journalists leaned in. This was Barron's counterstrike. You stand here waving a century-old document like it makes you a patriot, he continued. But your district ranks among the lowest in education and job growth. So tell me, Congresswoman, who exactly are you lifting up? Jasmine didn't flinch. This was what she had expected. This was exactly why she brought the second folder. I'm so glad you brought up accountability, she said, reaching under her notes. Because I came prepared for that too. She pulled out another document. This one labeled DOJ District Impact Report 2023-2024. It bore the Justice Department seal and several redacted sections. This is a nonpartisan audit of the 30th Congressional District in Texas, my district. It outlines year-over-year decreases in opioid-related deaths, improvements in public school graduation rates, and a 22% increase in small business funding access. She flipped the first page. And you know how we achieved that? Not by tweeting, not by blaming immigrants, but by showing up at schools, at hospitals, at parole offices. We changed policies. We fought banks. We demanded funding. That's called work. Barron shifted in his seat, visibly annoyed. Those numbers can be spun. Every politician cherry-picks stats. Jasmine leaned forward. Then, explain this. She slid another document across the table. This one from a Trump Foundation affiliate. Dated just 8 months prior, it detailed a failed educational pilot in a rural Georgia county that received $2.5 million in donor funds and produced 0 measurable outcomes. Barron stared at it. He knew what it was. That's not relevant, he said quickly. Oh, but it is, Jasmine countered, her voice cutting cleanly. Because while you attack my leadership, your name is attached to projects that exploit underfunded communities for headlines. That's not leadership. That's should be dressed as patriotism. The moderator raised a hand to intervene, but it was too late. The audience was already responding. Someone in the back clapped, then another. Soon a small ripple of applause spread through the room, not polite, but approving. Students in the gallery nodded. Even 1 or 2 Republican staffers exchanged glances that read, "She's winning this." Barron's composure thinned. He forced a smile again, tight, rehearsed. "Congresswoman, this isn't about me." "No," Jasmine replied. "It's about who gets to define American values and who gets erased from that definition." She looked directly into the camera. "And I won't let you erase me." Boom. End of part 3. The applause faded, but the energy didn't. The room was tilting, subtly but unmistakably, away from Barron Trump. And he could feel it. Not just the loss of control, but something worse. The erosion of certainty. For the first time since entering the political arena, his last name wasn't shielding him. It was anchoring him, dragging him down. He shifted strategies. "I came here to have a real conversation about youth and politics," he said, trying to reclaim the narrative. And instead, this became a personal attack. Jasmine Crockett tilted her head. "Personal?" she repeated, like she hadn't heard correctly. "You stood on this stage and told the nation I was un-American," she said calmly, "that I was unfit to guide the next generation." Then she leaned forward. "And now, you want to talk about tone?" The audience murmured again. The shift wasn't just ideological anymore. It was emotional. Students were reacting less like spectators and more like participants in a reckoning. Barron clenched his jaw. "Look, this isn't about race or privilege. It's about ideology. You represent a worldview that doesn't work. It's divisive, angry, built on victimhood." Jasmine stayed still for a beat longer than expected. Then she spoke, softly, but with razor precision. "You call it victimhood. I call it survival." She reached into her folder one last time. "Let me read you something." It was a short statement, written in blue ink on lined paper. "My name is Patrice Williams. I'm a single mom in Oak Cliff. 2 years ago, my son got into a fight at school. He was labeled a gang member. I called Congresswoman Crockett's office in desperation. I never expected a response. But the next morning, she was standing in our living room, face to face with my boy. That day, he was re-enrolled in a youth mentorship program. Now, he's applying to college. Jasmine looked up. That's American values? Silence again. But this one wasn't tense. It was reverent. Barron opened his mouth to respond. Nothing came out. And that's when Jasmine stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't posture. She simply said, "Being American isn't about bloodlines. It's about showing up. It's about doing the work, even when no one's watching, especially then." She turned to the crowd, her voice firm now. "You want to talk about patriotism? Then stop measuring it in last names and start measuring it in sacrifice." C-SPAN's viewer count spiked again. Clips began flooding Twitter. Last name is not leadership. Crockett 2028. Who showed up? Barron Trump remained seated, but it was clear. The elevation he once had, his height, his pedigree, his presence, had all been leveled by something far stronger. Truth. This wasn't the coming out moment he planned. This was a collapse, live streamed for the country to see. And Jasmine? She didn't celebrate. She simply walked back to her seat, calm as ever. Because she knew, when you've done the work, you don't need to gloat. The moment speaks for itself. The moderator tried to reassert control. "Let's return to the scheduled questions," she offered, voice trembling slightly, eyes darting between Barron Trump and Jasmine Crockett. But the room had already left the script behind. Cameras didn't cut away. Phones stayed up. The moment wasn't over, because Jasmine Crockett hadn't delivered a mic drop. She had delivered a message, and it was still echoing. Barron Trump sat, legs crossed, eyes downward. Not defeated, but deflated. For the first time, the weight of his name didn't give him gravity. It made him heavy. He had no closing statement, no clever retort, just silence. Meanwhile, Jasmine's phone buzzed on the podium. Mentions, alerts, donations. The Crockett campaign website was crashing under the load of new visitors. Her chief of staff, seated near the back, gave a subtle nod. It's happening. CNN ran a banner. Live. Crockett demolishes Trump in Georgetown debate. Fox News kept the broadcast up, but muted. Their studio analysts were already scrambling for new framing. And then, without cue or coordination, it happened. Applause. It started with a single clap, low and slow. Then another. Then dozens. Within seconds, the Georgetown debate hall was filled with a standing ovation. Not the polite clap of intellectual agreement. This was raw, emotional, earned. Students stood up, staffers stood up. Even a few of the Republican students, who had come to cheer Barron, now clapped with a strange, reluctant respect. Not because their views had changed, but because they had just seen leadership. Jasmine Crockett gave no speech. She didn't raise a fist. She simply accepted the moment with a soft smile and a respectful nod to the moderator. Barron remained seated, still towering in height, now humbled in silence. Over the next 24 hours, the clip of Jasmine reading Patrice Williams' letter became the most shared political moment on social media. It outpaced every GOP campaign video that week. Conservative pundits tried to dismiss it. Emotional theatrics, staged drama. But it was too late. The country had seen the truth play out on camera. And truth is a hard thing to walk back. Barron Trump released a formal statement the next day. Polished, defensive, full of abstractions. But it didn't matter. No one could unhear the silence he offered when asked to define his own contribution to American values. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett's inbox filled with invitations, interviews, endorsements. The DNC floated her name as a potential keynote speaker. One prominent senator reportedly said, "She did more for civic engagement in one night than we've done in a year." But Jasmine? She didn't claim victory. She returned to her district, to the high schoolers, to the parole officers, to the small business workshops. Because for her, patriotism wasn't won on a stage. It was proven every day afterward.